Hi guys, this is Leela. Welcome to my channel Leela Web Dev. So today we are diving into the world of HTTP and the client server model. So before learning about this client server model and all those things, so what I want to explain you is we need to understand some terminologies regarding the HTTP. Then only you can able to develop the applications using the HTTP without any problem. So if you doesn't have about these all terminologies, so then it will be difficult for you in order to understand the HTTP, the client server model. So now let's try to see one by one. Here, let's try to see one by one. So the first one, what we'll try to cover here is we'll try to cover about the client server model, the foundation of the HTTP communication. Then we'll try to see about the HTTP messages, requests and response that power the web. And we'll try to see about the status codes, understanding the server responses, and about the HTTP versions, evolution of the protocol. Let's talk about this client server model first. It is very super simple. Okay, so it is very super simple. A server is a computer that provides the resources or services, and a client is a device like your phone, laptop, or even a car that requests these resources. Think of the server as the one serving and the client as the one being served. So this is the main thing. So here server means the computer that serves the resources, and device means that device requesting the resources. And the server has a unique IP address, could be a browser, app, or a device, and listens for the request, and it initiates the communication, and it provides the response, and it processes the response. So that is the main difference between the client server and the model. So now you have a basic understanding about this one. So let's try to see about the IP address and the TCP communication. So now let's get into a nitty gritty. For a client and a server to talk, first of all, if the client and the server needs to talk, means it needs to establish a condition. Okay, before the HTTP exchange begins, client and server needs to establish a TCP condition. This allows reliable data transfer. So for a client and a server to talk, they need to establish a connection. This usually happens over TCP, a reliable way to exchange data across the networks. The client would be anywhere in the world and connects to the server which has a specific IP address. And the client has an IP address too, but we are focusing on the communication flow. So whenever we have the connection setup, the client initiates the connection, both devices exchange information to create a stable channel. And once established, the connection allows for HTTP messages to flow between the devices. So this is what it will happen. When a client requests for the thing, first a TCP connection will be established between these two. So that is the main thing. So let's go for the next step, next slide. So now I told you, right, when once the TCP connection has been established, so we are having three versions of the HTTP right now. Okay, so let's try to understand. So here is a quick note on connections. I will try to tell. HTTP versions 1 and 2 uses the TCP, whereas the HTTP version 3 uses the UDP. They work similarly, but for now we are sticking with the version 1 to keep things very simple. Once you understand the version 1, the others are a breeze. The key is that TCP ensures data gets from point A to point B reliably. Here the HTTP1, the original protocol version built on TCP, simple but less efficient. And next we got HTTP2, improved performance, also TCP based, supports multiplexing and compression. The last one is the HTTP3, which has been introduced in 2022 or something like that. This is the latest version built on UDP for faster connections, better handles packet loss. So that is the main thing. So how the HTTP message structure will happen? So once the TCP connection has been established, a HTTP connection will be established to exchange the messages between the client and the server, right? So how it will be? Once the TCP connection is set up, the client sends an HTTP message to the server. This message starts with a method like get to request a resource and a URL plus some headers that tell the server how to respond. These headers and the method are sent in the first TCP segment. If there is a body like data, the client wants to send its if the client wants to send it, it's broken into chunks and sent it in additional TCP segments. So now the client will request for an HTTP message. The start line is contains the method and URL or status code responses for this one. So next you will contain the headers, metadata about the message, and last one is the body. It's an optional, so like HTML, JSON, or file data. So it will be sent in the additional TCP segment which we have discussed it. So now let's try to see about anatomy of an HTTP request. How this HTTP request will look like. So now you to let the server know the message is complete. So what it will try to do, the client adds a special marker at the end of the last chunk. Think of it as a few characters like a new line or the slash n or slash t, something like that. This tells the server, hey, I am done sending. It's a standard part of the HTTP protocol to signal the end of the message. So first, when a request is made, a method and a URL has been sent, and it will try to send some headers also. The body is an optional, so this will be sent as a streams, chunk of data it will be sent. So how can the server comes to know that whether the last chunk has been received by the client, by the server? So the client will add an end marker to the last of the chunk, special character indicating that the message is complete. Then the server can understand that, okay, the client has finished sending up the data, so now I need to start processing. So like this, the end marker will be there. So like this, the HTTP request will be made. So now what about the response? Now it's the server turn to make the response. Once it gets the client message, it responds with its own message. This starts with the status code. First one, the status code, it will respond. And a text like 200 for success, 403 for upgrade, and 404. So these status codes will be coming. That depends. These codes are part of the HTTP protocol and tells the client that what happened with the request. For example, a 200 means here what you have asked for, while a 404 means sorry that the resource doesn't exist, something like that. Along with the, so here this is the status code. Along with the status code, what it will first it will try to send the status code. We'll try to see what are the different status code we are having it. Along with the status code, so you will be able to, the server will send the headers also, usually in the same TCP segment. Some headers are typically small. Then if there is a response body like a CSS file or a web page content, it is sent in chunks just like the client's body. The server also adds a marker at the end to say this is the end of the message. So here the headers is said the body, the request resource, and the body also, it will be sent in the chunk, something like that, and it will send you an end marker. So fine. So the different types of status codes are, one means information, the request meant, so one followed by any number means the request received and it is continuing the process. And then 2 with the followed by 200, 201, 202, something like that means it is a success message. Request is successfully received and it is processed. And if you are having 3xx means redirection, further action needed to complete the request. 4xx means the request contains bad syntax or cannot be fulfilled. So that means the request, the user doesn't, the client doesn't have an access to this one. 5 means the server failed to fulfill the valid request. So these type of status codes will be there in the server. So common HTTP status codes are 200, okay, the request succeeded, the resource was found and delivered. And 301, 302, redirect resource has moved temporarily or permanently. 404 means the request resource doesn't exist on the server. 500 means the server encountered an unexpected error. So now HTTP methods we already know: get request, retrieve a resource, post means create a new resource, put or patch means updating, delete means removing a resource. So this is the common thing. So headers also. So we need to learn the HTTP headers also. HTTP headers provide metadata about the HTTP message. They define how content should be processed, cached, or secured. So here first what will happen, the client request. Client sends an HTTP request to a specific URL. Server receives and processes the request. Server sends back an HTTP request and client processes the response, renders pages, etc. So this is what it will happen normally. So here TCP connection handling will be something like new connection for each request. Okay. So here it will new connection. So it will try to establish each connection, new connection for each request. Whereas keep alive connections will be there. With a keep alive connection is very much important. So that TCP connection will not be established all the time. So the connection will be alive at all the time only. And here this is the HTTP2, multiplex connections per domain will be there. So now there are different types. There is also another type of protocol that is nothing but WebSocket protocol. So where is this HTTP protocol? Whenever you send a request, then only the server will send the response. Whereas in the WebSocket, if the client doesn't send the request also, the socket will send you the response to the client. If the client doesn't initiate also. Here HTTP communication means the client must always initiate. So that means must always has to send a request in order to get a response. Server can only respond to that request. Whereas the WebSocket means after initial handshake, both client and server can initiate the messages. Real-time applications where we will be used is WebSockets enable chat apps, live updates, and gaming like that. WebSocket will be used. So here this is the message chunking. So this is how you will be sending the message chunking. We'll try to learn about this chunking, about this thing. So here HTTP message flow visualization. So first of all, how the HTTP message will be sent. First it will establish an TCP connection. It accepts the connection. Then it will send the request headers. It will process the headers. And then it will send the request body and wait for the response, process the response. Here it will accept the connection, process the headers, process the request body, send response headers, and last it will send the response body. So this is how you will be able to in the client side and the server side it will go on. So that's it guys about this client server model in the HTTP message. So hope you understood about this one. So in this video, at the end, what we have learned about the HTTP messages, complete unit of HTTP communication, either a request or response, how a message from the client to server asking for something, and how the response will be sent from server to the client, and an endpoint URL path that represents a specific resource on a server also we have learned. That's it guys about this. Hope you understood about this concept. So if you have any doubts or any suggestions, please post the comments below to this video. And if you like this video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you.